We're in. We're up.
Are we in?
We're on. And just so you know, I'm recording you right now.
Okay. And you know what? The on-ramp was 48 minutes today. This is crazy, dude. If we keep this up, the on-ramp will be the podcast. We won't even have time for the podcast. But some things popped up this morning that kept us going.
If we're going to honor the value-added conversation that happened a few weeks ago, though, about show notes, maybe we need to start recording from the moment that we get on, but only release the nicer part of it. We can hold back and keep the evidence of the on-ramp for ourselves, or we still want to keep it off digital.
And you have time to edit that out?
Well,
because that's what it comes down to. Who's going to take it out?
Dude, I think the bigger question is not would I have time, is would I make the time if I thought we could monetize that stuff?
We're not going there today, are we?
No.
This is a new season, Christopher.
I know.
Let's not soil our episode.
Soil our seasonal pants. We're not going to soil our season 3 pants.
Our season 3 digital pants.
The digital pants. Yeah.
Dude, I want to say a couple of things before we go deep. The first thing is, for anybody who watched our last week's episode, which I believe was...
was there 1 or 2?
41 or 40, I don't know.
What? Wait, pause. We had 40 people watch that video?
No, episode 40 or episode 41.
Oh,
it's our last one. No, 40 people. No. Dream on.
That would have been awesome. Okay,
so for anybody who watched it, we talked about these little emojis that we can use while we're talking to each other. So while Chris and I are Skyping, there's like little emojis we can use to communicate with each other without saying anything. We thought that those emojis would be visible to the people watching the recorded Skype. They're not. So anybody who watches, like, these two are crazy. They keep talking about these emojis that they're using that pop up. So right now as I'm talking, I'm clicking on the thumbs up emoji. So on Chris's end, he sees a big thumb up appear on his screen. And we thought that when we release this recorded version of our discussion, that you'd be able to see those things pop up too, but you don't. They're just for us. So as this is recording, the people who end up watching the recording never know that we use these emojis. So we're not as crazy as you think we are, number one. Number two, I did some math. This is our 89th episode ever. So this episode, which I already have a kind of a neat title for it, you could call this episode Season 3, Episode 1, or you can just call it Decoded Episode 89. I don't care what you want to call it. I don't even care about what I want to call it. I just thought I'd put it out there because Chris and I were talking about how many episodes we've done and that type of thing. But I am happy to say that we are starting a 3rd year of this experiment, right? It started 2 years ago, and it was used to track our school year. It was used to track like how we operate as dads and teachers and parents, husbands, and here we are. It's still going. So hey, Chris, thanks a lot for your time over the past couple of years, for being a good friend, and to many more episodes of the podcast and hanging out and having fun. There it is.
Hang it out there. Kudos to you too. It's funny, eh? Like 3rd year of an experiment. I guess, and with no real refinement to what the pursuit is. Just the drive to kind of meet up and chat up the week, and sometimes spending more time talking about what happened just like that morning before we hit record. So, but that's all cool. Yeah, I'm digging it. It's funny. I'm in that space where I was talking to my daughter the other morning, and she was asking about chasing squirrels. I say, yeah, I'm still I still have a couple episodes that I have to kind of get to and release. And she asked if I was going to keep on doing it, and I had to pause. I'm not sure. It's funny. I kind of got to space. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I want to switch it up and do something different with it. I asked her. I said, "Would you want to take it over and do a podcast? You could keep using the feed. We decide. We get to switch up what we're doing with it, and you could sort of do something with it." So she's thinking about that. Maybe I should offer it to my son. Just let him go kind of ape crazy with it and see what he would do with it. Don't know. But this, as far as the doing the decoded, it has been, and I imagine it still will be, a project worthy of the time that we put into it. I think a big part of it is that it feels like it's always so responsive and kind of immediate to the stuff that we have going on each week, and I think that's what makes it really, really interesting to me. I don't feel like there's much lag time between having ideas that I want to talk with you about and when we actually get to hash it out, start to realize how valuable that is, especially kind of in this, sometimes when I think about how PD works in schools and you're sort of waiting to talk about the stuff that you want to talk about. I mean, on one hand, yes, it's indulgent, of course, because we can do it. It's privileged because we have the tech to do it. We get to sort of choose how and when and whether we actually talk about stuff. And I recognize that there are others that they don't have those privileges. So, I greatly appreciate that. But I bring it back to, and through that, I bring it back to just my experience with podcasting. And one of the things that was always, it's not a frustration, it's just kind of the reality of doing podcasting where you're seeking out guests, is that there's that timeline from the point that you have an idea that sort of pops up in your head to the point that you make it to the conversation, to the point that you can release it. You're always time traveling. And sometimes for me, that draws just a little bit of the energy out of it, because I almost feel like I want to have a quicker turnaround with those combos. And I also really dig sometimes the confusion that can come out of thinking there's things I want to talk to you about. And then you'll present an idea and I'll realize, yeah, that's kind of more interesting and more on point, more current, more, I guess, more real than my starting point. And what's that as a gut check becomes important because there is the two of us in the room. And I had someone push back one time and say, yeah, but like, it's just the two of you. So how does that become broad or diverse enough to sort of merit, I guess was the word they were looking for, to sort of merit a weekly conversation? Do you ever think about that? Do you ever think about so let me do a starting point here is I do believe that this conversation, the starting point of this conversation is still you and I wanting to talk to each other. Like there's, as you said, the friendship, which I love. That's kind of like the starting point. The second point is that we happen to have overlap in our lives where there's things that we experience that individually definitely are made more interesting by being able to share them back and forth. The father, husband, the teacher elements. But I do sometimes, I find it remarkable how expansive. Well, I think you put it down in the decoded descriptor, something about, there are some simple things that we've made definitely more complicated just by talking about it. And I'll say I don't get to my sort of once a week sit down with you, though it's fed from other sources throughout the week. I haven't found a way to replicate that in real life yet. I might at some point, but I haven't yet. That was really rambly. Dig the friendship, dig the combos. Looking forward to season 3. Working title. Hope we haven't soiled our digital pants yet. And episode 89.
Oh, so you're calling it episode 89? So it's not, for you, it's not season 3, episode 1?
There's something funny. I don't know which one works better. It's funny how chaptering it that way, it suggests a certain reason for organization. Setting it just as the 89th conversation for me adds up somehow, because I think to myself, for every hour that makes it to the podcast, we've talked about this, other podcasters have talked about this, whatever produced hour you see, there's most often double that behind the scenes. So then I go, okay, there's 178 hours of personal professional development that's happened. So I don't know which one works better. I think when you're looking at podcasts, or you're looking to, do you need it chaptered, like sort of like this is a season that's going to be about? Because I think there's podcasts that do that. There's other ones that are just, it's one conversation after another. I don't know which one. I think personally, my brain recognizes just the numerical sequence. We're just counting up from wherever we started. I think a more interesting one was if you were starting at a number and counting backwards. So your whole podcast is a countdown. So you start right from the beginning. You say, only going to do 400 episodes, dudes. Only 400 episodes.
That'd be interesting. That's an interesting concept. Only 400, and then we're punching out. Wow. You know what? But there's even a way out there. There's even a way out mathematically. You could just, if you're looking at integers, you can just drop into the negatives, which is cool because there's always a way out. Wow. I can't believe I just did that. For someone who's not... No, the fact that I'm able to integrate mathematics into this conversation, what you said, this is a proud moment for me. It happened season 3, episode 1 / episode 89 of the Decoded podcast, where Roland made a connection to math that he's learned in life. That blows me away, dude. I can't believe I just did that. I'm really proud of myself. I have to say that. That's
good. We can also include, there's also you could have episode, if we were to flip this and say we're only going to do, if we said this particular, see, his are out. This particular iteration is only going to be 400 episodes long. As soon as we hit 0, episode 0, done. However, you can always do episode, 325.1.
Right.
So there's still
yes,
but there's something that is.
You could get down to the last episode. You get to episode 1 and then turn it into 1.1.
Yes. Yeah.
1.11. Like you could just keep going for. That's the beauty. Hey, that's the beauty of mathematics.
What would happen to? I'm thinking about the way that it gets published, how that would be viewed through YouTube and iTunes. Would it actually allow? I think it would. I don't think it. I'm trying to think of whether or not the code, if you were to put the number 400, like if you were to put the number, and then, because there was a time where I was putting just the number, and when I renumbered it, I think it reordered it. So when I renumbered and played with a different system in Podbean, I think iTunes was responsive to that. So it automatically shifted around in accordance with the sequence, starting with 1, going to whatever. So if we started with that outset number and so instead of saying 89, we would say this is episode 311. And then 310. That would be interesting.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting.
We can play with that. We can play with that offline.
I wanted to touch upon something you said earlier. Now it's gone, which really sucks because I felt like a twinge of passion. Before we were talking about this, you were talking about I got it now. Some people might argue that just the two of us talking and not having other people on might take away from the diversification of the topics we talk about and stuff. Am I accurate? Is that what you were saying?
Someone asked that question. They asked the question about there was a question and a statement. So the statement was, and this comes from Jen Mac Brown. So when I was talking to her, we were saying how we were talking about the sort of like, I guess it's the how we engage in our reflective practice. I'll try and knock this down just to kind of bring it back to you as fast as possible. We were talking about methods of reflective practice, and within methods of reflective practice, there's this space of privilege where individuals that are almost leisurely sharing and pursuing conversations is just the epitome of privilege. As in, you can sort of choose to talk about the topics in a way that is kind of ego-centered. So you can go seeking that single conversation. You can sort of take the time to culture the thinking. You have time to sort of shape it. And in some cases, some talking then about blogging and podcasting, you can actually amend the thinking so it stays in line with your brand or your sort of like your perspective. And her pushback on this within this conversation, and I'm paraphrasing, Jen, you come back and you sort of talk and sort of tell me if I'm totally off of this. But the other part that came out of this is that there are individuals that don't have that privilege. The things that they are fighting for are right there in front of them. The things that they want to understand are right there in front of them. The conversations that they're looking to have are right there in front of them, and they can't look away or bench it and say, well, I'll talk about it another time. So that was sort of like the provocation about the privilege of reflective practice and how we choose to engage with it. And I don't have a solid response to it other than, yeah, it's true. The topics, very few of the topics that I've ever engaged with on my podcast do I feel like I need to have an answer for when I turn to work on Monday, because my EDU life is kind of dependent on it. Like I don't have that absolute. And then the second part kind of came out of some discussions I had about, and I don't know who put it. Oh, I think it was Schreffler that put up about what is the goal of your podcast? Like trying to sort of just nail down and put a flag in it. What is it that you're trying to do? And out of those conversations, I mean, it becomes more complex when you're no longer doing a interview style podcast. If it becomes a little bit more of a stream of consciousness, which is, I think, what you and I engage in, like the topics just kind of weave backwards into, they're coming at us and we're sort of just looking at the river of stuff, and there's the two of us deciding how we want to swim through it. And that then led into well, what is the value of not having someone from outside? And again, you bring in EDU bubbles. How do you find the value? And I think this is kind of like a marketing statement. How do you find the value? How would a listener find value in what you're listening to when it's just the two of you? I think what it kind of comes down to is, well, you guys must really think you're really interesting in order to do a weekly 89 episodes of just the two of you talking. So those two things kind of cracking off.
So where should I start then? Because there's a couple of things that I'm going to take my own advice and I'm going to accept what someone has said and to consider it. And I have a response. And it's kind of like there's different layers to the response. The first response is, I don't want to talk to anybody else. That's the first response. I don't want to talk. I don't want to have 50 different people to talk to on here. If I can be selfish for a minute, the reason I wanted to start this podcast 2 years ago is because I had an idea about what I wanted to do and that I still wanted to cast. And I asked you if you wanted to join me on the journey. So like at the base of Decoded Podcast, as I see it, is that I wanted to continue to podcast and I wanted to talk. I didn't want to talk by myself. And I thought you were a good dude. You were in the same podcasting space. And I trusted you. I could take my armor off and talk to you. And so I said, you want to do this? And you said, yes. So that's number one. Number two I acknowledge that there's other positions that are missing from our conversation, and I'm aware of it, and that's enough for me. I'm aware and I acknowledge. I'm moving on. I just think to myself, for me, in my context, when I did Roland Chidiac Connects, I was chasing people down. I was constantly like saying to people, hey, I'd love to talk to you on the podcast for this reason. And if you just sat on one person and tried to convince them or waited for them to respond to say yes or no, that my podcast would have been as slow as molasses for me. I wouldn't have been able to get out of it what I wanted. That ran its course, and I was done with that. And so I don't want to be chasing people down. I don't want people to negotiate times with me of when we can talk and when we can't talk. You and I talk at a particular time every week, or at least we try to. And between the two of us, it's easier to manage a backup schedule or a backup plan. All of that gets tossed out the window the minute you decide to invite somebody in. You say, hey, Saturday morning, 8 a.m. I'm busy. Can we do it Saturday at 2 p.m.? I really want to be on. We really want you to be on too, but I'm going to be at hockey, and Clough's got to take his daughter to art class. So that's not going to happen. Then you do this back and forth. Like, do you see in my little brain, those are the things that happen. I don't have to deal with any of that stuff the way we do this. So my response is, you're correct. We are probably missing, well, not probably, we are missing different voices at the table. But that's not the table that we've set for ourselves. Or maybe I shouldn't speak for you. That's not the table I set for myself 2 years ago when I invited you to join in. Now, it started that way. I would say now this podcast is a lot more. It's not just Roland's podcast. It's Roland and Chris's podcast. And I feel like we go back and forth in how we approach the podcast, what we talk about, even how we push it out, right? Like, so far, everything's been hunky-dory. You say something, I'm like, yeah, let's do it. Or you say something, or I say something, you're like, that's not going to work. We don't do it. So there is a back and forth. It's not me running the show. But if you go back to how it started, the facts are it started in a particular way because I wasn't interested in chasing people down anymore, in negotiating times to talk and reflect. So I acknowledge and accept that position, and I appreciate it. It's a great question. It's a great wonder. Here's the answer from my perspective. And hey, if you want to go nice and deep, if you really want to go nice and deep, which is going to lead me into a conversation I had with my principal the other day, I ultimately don't care who's listening. I don't. This is for me. So at a very selfish level, what we do, I benefit from hugely. And if it stopped, that would suck. I'd find another way to make me advance, I guess. So at the end of the day, I'm not doing this so that, we can have 50 new followers for whatever reason because we're talking to John Doe this Saturday, and then, another 50 might jump in because, we invited Jane Doe on this day. That's not why I'm in this. So even me talking about this is awesome reflection for me. For me to get this out of here, to have it come out and go right back in is so beneficial to me. We just happen to do it by recording our conversation and pushing it out. And some people say that they enjoy hearing what we have to talk about. And some of them even reach out on social media and talk to us about what we talk about. Those for me is all bonus for me. Because if you told me nobody wanted to talk to me anymore about it and nobody was listening, we'd still be doing this. Or at least I still would be doing this. So sorry to take all that and
Mm-hmm.
like turn it into something huge. But the other day, my principal came into my class to talk to me to chat, and we just came to this place in the conversation. It was really interesting because I value his opinion and I value his position on leadership, friendship, and we had this really honest conversation. And I found myself saying to him, "Listen, I'm in a position here in your building where I know you're the boss. I also know that you're a good guy and I consider you a friend. But at work, if you ask for something or if you tell me how something's going to be, then that's how it's going to be. You are my supervisor, you are my boss. Outside of here, I consider you a friend. Like I would invite you over to my place to hang out. You know, if you invite, well, his son's playing junior hockey, and he messaged me and said, "Hey, my son's playing on this day. If you and the kids are free, come on out and check it out." Like he invites me to go see his kid play hockey, and that and he's been invited to come watch Will play hockey. So there's a friendship, but there's also the notion of at work you're my boss, and when you speak to me from a position of principle, you're my boss, and I'm not gonna muddy that. And I said to him, like I would hope that if I was not doing the job the way that you expect it to be done, or the way you brought me on with your vision, and I'm here to do my thing I agree with your vision. That's why I'm here. And so if I'm not doing something the way you see fit, I would hope that you would tell me. And we had this really good conversation about that. But it was at the end of it, it was, dude, I'm just being straight with you. I'm just telling you how I feel. We had this great conversation. I'll end it with this. We had this great conversation about leadership and becoming an administrator. And we were going back and forth. And I said to him, based on what I know of you and based on the work that I've done in this past school year, if I talk to you about being a reference for me, to apply for, the VP position, I'm assuming that you would be quite supportive. And his response was, for sure. He said, I would tell you what I would say about you. And that might include some stuff you need to work on. But nobody ever wants to hear about what they need to work on. And I said to him, that's fair enough. Like I said to him, if I sat down with you and I said, hey, I'd really love it if you'd be a reference, and then you tell me what it is you see about my work that would benefit the role of a principal and what I would need to work on, you might tell me some things that I'm not willing to do, or that my life, that I don't want to make the sacrifices to do. And it was awesome having that honesty there to say to him, you could say to me, hey, you need to do more of this, this, and this. And then I could say to you, well, that's not going to happen right now because of this, this, and this in my life. I'm in a position and I'm in a point in my life where that's okay. I'm not going to bend over backwards and lose my mind to try to do something that you feel I need to work on for you to help me move into this position. That's not going to happen. And it's funny because he laughed, because the way I said it was relatively, it was a little militant, right? Like, you can tell me what you want. If it doesn't work for me, I'm not doing it. But at the same time, I am flexible to a certain extent. I'm not saying I will never do this. I'm saying, oh, that's what you need to see from me right now. That's not going to happen. You're not going to see that because of this circumstance in my life. But now I know where you stand, right? So now I know if you feel I need to be doing this type of thing better, and that part of my professional world is just not accessible to me at that time, then it's not going to happen, and that's okay. And we left laughing because I was just so very. He said to me, that's what happens when you get to your age. He says, wait until you're my age. And then you really see, like, people just stand, they just know what they value so much that they're just not going to step away from what they value. It doesn't mean that they're being difficult. It doesn't mean that they're being inflexible. It just means at a certain time in their life, certain things hold more weight. So the first thing I said to my vice principal when I saw her was, please tell me on the duty schedule that I didn't get after school duty. And she looked at me all like, why? And I said, because you know my boys do extracurricular, and you know that that duty would preclude me from leaving right after school on certain days. And I said, we're gonna have to fix that. Like, I'm gonna have to find another duty. And she just laughed, right? Because what I'm saying to her sounds crazy to her, but to me, it's my world. For you to tell me I need to do this at this time and I can't leave until this time, that interferes with my world outside of what I do all day and sometimes at night and on the weekends for my job as an educator. If it interferes with my kids, then we have a problem. I have a problem. And it's just, she's like, relax. That's not the duty you have. I'm like, okay. And I said, I'm just being proactive. I'm not going to wait until, you know, the last minute to tell you I can't do that duty. That's not cool for me. And that's not cool for you. So, like, as soon as the duty schedule comes out, I look at it. If there's something there, and after school is the only thing, right? And it's not every day, but at certain days. And some of my colleagues, they chirp me for that. They're like, oh, there he goes again. First one out of the building after school. See ya. I'll be back tomorrow morning. You can say what you want. It's not going to stop me from doing what I need to do. So if we roll it right back to this conversation at the beginning of this, if you tell me that my conversations, and I'm not, you know, poor Jen Brown, I'm not like pushing back on you. I'm just saying, if somebody tells me your podcast is not diverse enough, it's just you and Clough talking, I'll say, awesome. Thank you very much. I appreciate your position. And it's a good one, but there are some things that are just not going to happen. And what's not going to happen is you and I are not going to have 50 million guests on to diversify the discussions we have. It's not going to happen. I'm sure other podcasts do that. I hope you find it, and I hope it gives you what you're looking for. Decoded Podcast isn't going that way for a number of reasons. Oh, you're muted. I appreciate you muting yourself because I know sometimes you just want to jump right in.
Yeah, I love doing that because it totally has kind of defanged some of my passion that I was going to throw down on that statement. So it was a good kind of like a screen pillow for a second that I was still on mute. So Jen, to clarify, Jen's part of that thought was the why do we post? And talking about the privilege of posting. It was in a Twitter chat that it came out talking about is there still value in having the two voices in the room? So just to separate the two out, Jen was just throwing down, because she and I were talking, and I asked her about is there ever, and this plays into what we're talking about right here. I said, do you write for you or do you write for someone else? And she had mentioned that she more times writes for, like, it was more the writing for someone else, like something to respond to. So unless there was sort of like the need per se, at that time when she reflected on her reflective practice, it was more in response to something that was going on. And I found that interesting because I think I'm kind of the other side. Like, I'm just more, maybe, like, I will just kind of talk about whatever, like, I'm open to that discussion. My frame was just a little bit in it, sort of looking in a different direction, but kind of included, because I would say I was looking back, like, I often just kind of will post out things that are just my thoughts, maybe not well formed. It couldn't necessarily be in its polished version. It's just getting to the conversation and let's see what happens. So I'm good with the direction that the podcast is going in. I like to entertain the idea of trying to hone the focus, but I don't think I ever get anywhere. Like, I never get to a spot where I feel like, yeah, that's what I want this to be. I think what I've always appreciated about reflective practice is that it's an opportunity. Like, that's all it is. And what do you sort of do when you find yourself in that opportunity? What I like is funny. What I like about Decoded, and you may have alluded to this, is that it's a manageable accountability structure. Like I feel the commitment to the conversation, but recognize it's not as simple as saying we have to sort of meet at the specific time each week. And others have mentioned this. I think even Stephen Hurley that first kind of tabled this idea that it would be really hard to be an audience member. And the counter to that, well, that it would just be hard to be an audience member if you were hoping to hear it live, which is no longer really possibility anymore. Thanks, Google. But we're not putting this out where you would say, yes, I know at 7:30 a.m. on Saturday mornings I can listen to Clough and Chids talk about life and how EDU changes it. But I firmly believe that this is to sort of steal from something, to steal from a negative frame, is that I think it's a necessary silo, because there's silo with a nice deck and a pool, so we sort of can include other thoughts and other people, but there's something about the accountability that I know I can lean on a conversation coming down the pipe at some point, and it's 99% of the time, no, I'm gonna say 100% of the time, it's entirely, it's the agility that I like about it. It's responsive to what's going on in our weeks, and I find that's the more critical element right now for me in my reflective practice, is that to sort of get to the conversation as close to the actual incident as possible. So I don't know. Have you? I don't know if I've asked you this one before. Do you go back and re-listen to our episodes ever?
There have been a couple of times where I'd be on the Decoded YouTube page,
Mm-hmm.
and I think I go there to tag, like after I do like a vlog or something, I'll tag it,
Mm-hmm.
and one of our conversations will pop up. Like all our conversations are there, and one of them it'll catch my eye, and I'll click on it. It'll start playing, and I immediately go right to the middle of the video. Like, I don't want to hear us talking about, hey, it's episode whatever. I just randomly go like in the middle third of the video,
Yeah.
click on it and see what we were talking about. That's what I do here and there. Generally speaking, I don't re-listen to anything we say or do. Like, I find that once the conversation's over, it's over. I mean, I wish sometimes that I could, like, somebody will say something to me and I'll say, oh, I have an opinion on that. And I want to refer them to the section of where I talked about it here. But that's like with 88 episodes, at least 88 hours of time. It's probably over 100 hours of talk time. It's hard to pinpoint what I said and where I said it. Do you ever like rewatch some of these or listen to them?
No.
Yeah. There's other things going on, man.
Flat out. And that was another piece that's popped up with that popped into the conversation with Jen Brown, and it popped into at least two other conversations with Jen Apgar, and talking about podcasting as reflective practice. It's funny because my justification, it's not a justification, I guess my thinking is that because I feel like I'm in a conversational mode, that a high percentage of my thinking goes on record. Like, it all comes out in the interaction on the podcast. And it's funny, I feel like it's closer to the bone than my secondary and tertiary thinking on my thinking. It's that idea, like in memory, like how memories change the more you think about them. Like, you actually start to create more of a fiction as you get further and further away from the actual memory. So I'm pretty happy that my initial thinking is always captured in this mode, like with camera and with microphone and digitally and sort of put right out there, because it's to me a very clear snapshot of my thinking at that time. So with that being said, like if I go back through the list of individuals that I talked with on my podcast, as I see the individual people, I can go back and I can remember what we talked about. Like I can sort of, that's all I need for me, the trigger to sort of go back into the sense that I had of what we talked about. For my accounting of those conversations has changed over times from sketch notes to, I mean, I'm playing with my own learning as I'm learning. So sometimes sketch notes, sometimes I drew a picture specifically. A couple of my blog posts, I found a poem that kind of connected to it. So you go through and you're like, wow, like these show notes are all over the place. But that's the messiness of my learning. I still have the artifact of the conversation. So me to go back and re-listen to the whole thing, man, like it's really alien, because I think I'm no longer there. Like I'm no longer there in the conversation. Like it almost feels like it feels too distant. And what I really dig is that I really like the emotionality and the kind of the confusion and the kind of the tension that happens when the conversation is happening. I find my questions are better, my thinking is clearer, and I get to my points of interest with the person that I'm talking to more effectively. Now, as far as the process of going back, it's funny, to sit down and to listen for me it's too much effort. It's funny, one of those things where if I really, like, for me, here's the back door on this thinking, back to the show notes thing. If I were to include in my reflective practice to go back in and review my reflective practice, I would actually prefer to go back and do transcripts. Just skim and scan through the transcript, not have to sort of play with the time key and sort of zip back and forth through it. Like I would actually just prefer to kind of go cold if I were just looking for the information, because I'm not nostalgic enough to go back and sit in the relationship of the conversation again. It's gone, it's done, move forward. But I will say that there are things that are discussed in there that are key words, key terms, key ideas, that all I would need is the cue for it. I wouldn't need to necessarily listen to the whole thing long form. It's kind of a, and part of it, I guess, is time. Like, I don't think I tell myself I don't have the time to sit. I don't have the time to review that. I feel like I'm always funny, now that you got me thinking about it. The time that I'm taking to learn new things, here's my choice. Right now, it would be a choice of whether or not to learn new things or to review old things I've already learned, because of what I'm constantly bringing in to shape my understanding and my perspective, whether I'm just talking about my own personal development or my development professionally. I'm always taking in so many new experiences that to stop those experiences, which tend to come at me in a very natural fashion. I'll check Twitter, I'll have a conversation with someone at work, I sort of text you during the day, like all these kind of opportunities to sort of think about education in a new way are constantly, again, we're stepping into that river thing, are flowing at me. To step out of that river in order to sort of walk back down to a spot that I don't think I can even get back to again, I'm not willing to kind of spend that time. Maybe when I stop having, maybe here's the thing, when I stop, and maybe this is the thing about nostalgia, when I stop having an accessible source of new thinking, I don't know if that'll necessarily happen, but when I retire and I no longer have that constant feed, maybe I'll become more nostalgic. Maybe I'll go back and I'll spend time with those memories. I don't know.
Cool.
Yeah.
Something to think about. Good question.
I would be curious. Yeah, I'll throw that out to our hordes of followers. What's your reflective practice based on your reflective practice?
Uh-oh, is that homework?
No, not
Are
for
you
you and
doing
I.
this? Oh,
No, no, no,
no,
not
no,
for
but
you
I
and I.
mean, you know how you used to drop homework at the end of an episode?
Yeah, I'm putting it pre-credits this time though. This is like one of those pre-credits, but no, yeah, pre-credits, which is just that's the movie. If you say you're putting like a what do they call that? A credits, a mid-credit. What are they in the movies? What's it actually called? What's the term for that? Like, a Marvel movie, and they put like a little thing. Like we've gotten used to staying for the credits now because we know there's going to be some. Like a mid-credits teaser or
Oh,
a
gotcha.
post-credits
Yeah, yeah.
teaser. Yeah, this is a pre-credits teaser. So we're actually doing it during the film. You don't have to stay for the credits afterwards to know that. I'm curious about that. I'm curious about how people do their how they deal with their reflective practice once the source is gone. So do they go back and they reread? Do they rewatch? Where that leads me to, and I'll jump off this train, is that idea of uh, how do you action elements from your reflective practice. I think a big part of our journey with this experiment is often I'm doing something with what we've talked about almost as soon as I get off the conversation with you. Like I might be going back in to check a thing. I'm sort of like sending a message out to somebody. I'm sort of making some notes in my day planner as far as what I have to do on Monday. And it's that quick kind of turnaround time. So,
Can I drop something that really I want to drop this because it did something to me. It had me thinking in a certain way that I wonder if people, I'm pretty sure the way I was thinking about this situation is the way some people think about teachers and the and any profession. Are you ready for this? It was kind of weird to me.
I
Okay.
love the mystery. Do it.
Yesterday, my son and I were at the Blue Jays game, and
Okay.
we were sitting there watching the pregame stuff, and a police officer, a canine police officer, appeared in our field of view, and he was with his dog, and the dog was going around sniffing or whatever, and what caught my eye was the police officer's left arm. So the police officer was holding the dog's leash in his right arm, and his left arm was a prosthetic limb that had a hook on the end. So he wasn't wearing a hand, he was wearing a hook. A very
Okay.
rudimentary, basic. So that the first thing I thought was, that's interesting. You don't see that often. Like you don't see that often. And then the second thing was, how can he do his job? How can he do his job with that reality that he lives with? And then I stopped and I thought, well, obviously he can do the job because he's out there doing it. It's not like they're like, you lost your arm or you were born with no arm at some point, and so here, let's test drive this policing business and see how you do. That's not what it was. And it had me thinking about a number of things. It had me thinking about, with respect to the, I know this is weird, eh? This is where my mind goes when I'm just sitting, just chilling. Um, there are people we see sometimes, and we automatically decide what they can and can't do based on their appearance, which is completely crazy if you stop and think about that for a second. Then I wondered, why do people do this? Like when people meet me, they talk to me for a little bit, and then they find out I'm a teacher. First, the teaching thing is tough for them. I don't know why. They're just like, you're a teacher? And then the second thing that really messes with them is that I'm an elementary primary teacher. And that package is hard for them to swallow. And I'm not sure why. So I wanted to drop that because the beauty of the work we do are the types of people that come to the profession. So why, I'm just asking this, I'm just thinking out loud because I kind of know the answer. I kind of don't know the answer. We like to pigeonhole people. We like to believe we understand a person based on what they look like or their attitudes and perceptions, and then we do something with that, right? We categorize people. But when we do that, we shut ourselves off from a bigger world, right? Like from the ideas that exist out there. So if people take the time to hear how I ended up becoming a teacher, then they might be able to learn something from that or to appreciate the complexities of life and what leads someone to enter into a realm in the world. So then if we go back to the police officer for a second, so I made a mental note, and my friend works for the police service, the Toronto Police Service. And so last night when I got home and I was just, chilling, debriefing, I messaged him. I said, "Hey, pal, this is what I saw today. Do you know this individual?" And my friend responded and said, "Yeah, I know him. He's a good guy." And I told him that I had a moment of, how can this person do this job with the reality that he's in? And he said to me, he does a great job, and then gave me some background on the individual. The individual was once in the armed forces, and that's where the loss of the limb occurred. And it's just interesting to me. And I'm talking about it today because it blows me away that we make judgments based on someone's appearance or based on something they've said in a particular context, and then you find out something about this person that doesn't fit with your experience with them. There's that dissonance. And that's what I wanted to reflect on today, because as I start my 18th school year on Tuesday, there are going to be people that see me for the first time and are going to make judgments. And I know that that's part of human nature. We all do it. What I'm doing now is I'm generally more aware that that's how we operate, how most people operate. I can't speak for everybody, but most people operate, because you know how many times somebody have said, "Oh, let me tell you what I initially thought of you the first time I met you." So it's not just me doing this, it's a lot of people doing this. I'm now got this space in my head where I'm more aware. I'm aware that I need to question myself after I make the judgment. So I make the judgment, and then I'm like, whoa, hey, don't close this off. Leave the door open, because you don't really know what's going on. You don't really know what you think you know. And that has been such a gift, that awareness, and leaving the door open in my mind to allow other information to come in or information to come out. Either way, that open space where things can come in the door or go out the door, it now has it's provided me with some kind of enlightenment, some kind of curiosity. Now, having said all that, I found myself at work the other day where my armor was down. So now I'm switching gears. I'm going to use some language from Brene Brown's book, Dare to Lead. My armor was down, and I was in a situation where I was openly vulnerable. And then a few people stepped into the conversation, and my armor was right back on, and 100% aware of what I was doing. All of a sudden, I just clammed up, and I was totally aware. And my awareness was, I'm not giving you a piece of me right now. I'm choosing not to let you into my world, the vulnerable Roland. I'm choosing that because I don't trust you based on not one past experience, but several past experiences. And then again, the door's still open. So as I'm in this situation, I'm listening to the person. I'm listening to them. I'm watching their behavior. I'm looking at the cues that are being given to me. Do I drop the armor now? Do I leave it back up? Like, so I'm even flexible within my inflexibility of deciding. I'm putting my armor up. I'm not going to let you into the vulnerable Roland right now because I don't trust you and I don't like what you've done with me in the past when I've been vulnerable. Um, there is something really cool going on with all that. And I don't even know if anything I've said has made sense to you, but if you could get into my head and you could experience that, it's an exciting space to be in. It's an exciting space to have my judgments, but to leave the door open for more information, right? That either you give me or that I stumble across somewhere along the way. So all that came from a very real, like even my son said, even my son who's 9, he said, Dad, what happens if, like, what happens if something's occurring and that police officer needs to act? How will he act with the particular prosthetic that he's wearing today? Because even my son knows, hey, if you've got a prosthetic limb, there are different types that you can attach to yourself. Like on this particular day, this individual was wearing not the hand with the fingers and the thumb type of device. This was more a very simple metal hook type device. And my son even said that that looks a little frightening because it is. Like you just see just metal hanging at the bottom of somebody's arm, you know. And so even my son said, what happens if this individual has to jump into action and there's a situation and this individual is responsible for protecting people and for stopping other people from causing harm? I said, you know what? I said, I'm having the exact same thought, but I have to tell you, I said, do you think that the people responsible for this individual's job, do you think that they would allow him to do this work if he was not able to do what it is that they expect him to do? And my son said, that's a good point, Dad. Like, that's a really good point. They're not going to let someone do this kind of work if they can't act when they need to. I'm like, that's all you need to know. That's the bottom line. So whatever they look like, whatever they're wearing, it's all good. And for the rest of the day, this was an amazing, I think, eye-opening experience for my son, because then as we were walking around the stadium, every time he would see a police officer, he would comment on what makes them different. So, you know, as we're, and it was funny too, because I wondered what the cops were thinking as he's pointing at them and saying something, right? Um, so just allow me to share a couple of the instances that just, it brings a smile to my face, and I think I'm helping him open his eyes to the world. So we're walking and he sees a very petite female police officer who one of her arms was just covered in tattoos. So he points, he's like, look, that lady's shorter than you are, Dad. And then he laughs because my kids laugh at how short I am. That lady's shorter than you, and she's got a whole sleeve of tattoos, but she's a police officer. So she's one of the helpers that's been chosen in our society to help. So that's right. We keep walking. He goes, look at that guy. He's really a stereotypical big male, no expression on his face. But my son told me that the minute he made eye contact with my son, he smiled. And so he's like, this guy's walking down the hall looking like Hulk. He looks at me, he shoots me a smile, and all of a sudden I feel like, hey, he's a helper too. And just two examples of, I'm hoping I gave my 9-year-old something yesterday by talking about it and by being honest about what I was feeling, that I gave him something that will help him navigate the world. because he is a little bit hypersensitive. He's a little bit frightened right now of the world. Like yesterday, there was a father and a son sitting beside us, and the father got up and left. So the son was literally sitting in a stadium of thousands of people, and my son said to me, "Dad, where did this kid's dad go?" And I'm like, "I don't know, maybe to get some food, maybe to the bathroom." But I said to my son, "This kid's in the safest place right now." And my son said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, nobody's going to take him here. He's in front of all these people. He's sitting in his seat. He's watching the baseball game. He's as safe as he can be with his dad not sitting beside him." Then my son said, "Well, what do you mean?" I said, "Well, do you think I'm going to let something bad happen to this kid sitting next to me?" He said, "No." So well, there you go. There's more of us than there are of people that want to do bad things. So this father's gone to get food or gone to the washroom. If he had taken his son with him, it might not be the safest place for his son to be, because now his son is exposed with all kinds of people walking back and forth. Nobody's really supervising the kid. I said, that seems to me like it might be a little bit more dangerous. And then he says, "Well, would you ever leave me here?" And I said, "No." I said, "You'd come with me, and I'd always find a way to make sure I was watching you and that you were attached to me somehow." But I said, "But this man's living his life a different way." But I said, "The kid is safe. Nothing's going to happen to this kid while he sits beside us. And nobody's going to come and try to take this kid," which might happen in a bathroom if your dad's in the stall, whatever. My son's he's in the middle of frightening himself right now, generally speaking. I don't know if your kids are doing that. But going back to the original reason for me sharing this story is this openness in my brain that is, I feel so enlightened. I feel so fresh. It's really interesting. And it's allowing me to know when I get my back up, and it's allowing me to know when my armor's on and why it's on. And what I'm going to do, what I've been working on, is trying to take pieces of armor off with people that automatically I don't want any part of it off with. I'm trying. I'm working on it, and we'll see where it goes. Even my armor's even up when there's nobody with me. So when I was looking at the extracurricular sign-up sheet at our staff meeting the other day, I'm seeing items on there that I would like to participate in, but there are other people who listed their names there that I don't particularly want to spend any time with. And so there's that whole thing again. Is this extracurricular important enough to me for me to put my name down and have to spend time with this other individual or these other individuals? And I have an answer for you. The answer is that I put my name down for something. I created a whole new category. They encourage that if you don't see something there you like, but there's something you want to do for the school community, write it in. And so I wrote down the primary esports and I put my name there. And then my thinking is, what happens if some of those people look at that and want to participate? If they put their name there, will that push me away or not? And the answer is it won't, because I believe in that extracurricular activity so much. I'm feeling such a passion for it that even if you put the person that I would never want to spend time with at work with me, I'm not going to let it go. I'm going to stay, because that's how much it means to me. That's how much I value it at this time, that I'm not going to walk away from it. So I wanted to share that with you. I'd love to hear what you have to say about it, your position on that. I believe, from knowing you for the last couple of years, I feel like you are generally more of an open person than I am, but that's my judgment of you. But my door is open to hear otherwise, if that's the case.
Gonna thread back through that. So your initial observation of the cop and his cybernetics, the cool sort of like the tech, made me think about I think I shared about this in there's a really cool, I don't remember if it was a podcast, The Hidden Brain, but you and I talked about the were we talking about the guy that had the tech had something to do with music. It had to do with, I think it was the synesthesia, the sort of seeing having his musical genius, that he can take, he sees colors associated with different music. And I don't remember the whole story there, but he did a kind of a cool project where he optimized that. And then there's the other story that I remember about an individual that was born blind, and he learned to use echolocation to move around his space. And he very much became, he's an advocate for teaching other individuals that have any issue with their sightedness, to teach them to be able to navigate the world in a way that they feel comfortable in and honors their curiosity, and basically allows them to, quote unquote, see the world as they want to. And he was the one that started this, kind of put this forward, that blindness is socially defined. So the idea of being blind, to his measure so far, was never defined by individuals that actually were blind. So it was a deficit definition. And his perspective was that he's no more limited than anyone else in the world. He said it's the world that has this perspective that is incorrect. And he goes by, check my case history. He goes, as a kid, I climbed fences, I climbed trees, I rode a bike, and it just took me a while to figure out my method for it. And he teaches other individuals that don't have the societally typical eyesight that we've come to assume, that everyone, can see perfectly well out of their two eyes. And he teaches people to really let go of that mentality and use, in his case, other senses to complement the navigation. So, a big part of his training with individuals is walking in downtown spaces and crossing streets. And then being able to speak back to not only what is it that you as the individual have to offer, like how can you do this in a way that is safe, relatively safe, still honoring your curiosity, and that you have agency. And then pushing back on saying, when we design things for a fully sighted world, well, we're not really taking into account the opportunity and the best of everybody. We're sort of designing a world in a very specific manner that is intentionally precluding people from engaging with it. So when you started to talk about the cybernetics or the prosthetic, the extra tools that this dude had, that's where my brain kind of went. And I thought to myself, it's our perspective of functionality that is kind of socially constructed and probably not accurate. So I'm fascinated by that. And I love the fact, totally makes sense. When we boil it down to what are the components you need to do this job? Either biological or not. What are the body components that you need to do this job? The other space that you dipped into that's interesting to me is I agree with you. It's funny. I agree with you in that there's the crowdsourced potential for that to be the safest space. When you're talking about, I don't know if I would do it. I don't know if I would I'm trying to think of what my layers would be. My kids, I often put them in situations where they learn. So the conversation that we had recently was talking about, so they're on the cusp of starting to walk home for themselves, no longer, going to be in daycare, aftercare. And the conversations, what does that support system look like for them to actually come back home on their own? And Madeline mentioned that, I'll probably need a mobile phone. And I said, no, you don't. You need to know how to manage that moment. Okay. And I said to her flat out, I said, if you are running into trouble, you may be able to get in touch with me or mommy, like via phone. But what that could actually do is keep you from dealing with what's in front of you and really managing what's being presented to you. So we talked about, the whole stranger danger conversation. Like, what do you do if? And we talked about, where do you bite? Where do you kick? How loud do you scream? Where do you run to? So I said, for me, I if from a parent perspective, I said, I need to be confident that you know how to act and react in those situations. And as a possibility, maybe call me on a phone. I said, but however, I would feel so much better that if you knew, because there's friends that live along the path, that you would say to me, I'm going to run to so and so's house, or I'm going to talk to such and such a person because I can measure them as a safe person to talk to. And we've talked about that being when I take them grocery shopping. Like, if you get lost in the grocery store, how do you sort of work your way back without feeling, without getting hung up on fear and losing your agency? And they know, they'll talk to a cashier, they'll talk to someone that's walking with kids, like someone in a uniform, so they go through this list. So yeah, open. I may be slightly more open because I do kind of dangle my kids over these challenges, but it's kind of based on an operating system of navigating the world. And yeah, I mean, there's still there's fear. Of course, there's fear. Um, I try to sort of recognize, what is it actually. I settle into it. What is it the fear of? I don't want to have fear that they can't defend themselves. I don't want to have the fear that they don't know how to speak up. Those are the fears that I feel like I can help them manage right now. The one fear, and I just kind of choose not to really give it much time, is the fear that there's just some wacko out there that's going to do something, because that is just so random to me that it's so random to me that I feel like there's nothing I can actually do other than kind of this to my kids and never let them go, right? Like, it's a very kind of parental mindset, eh? Yeah.
So,
and
oh,
and
and
we got to throw down, and because I'm going to put it like, despite the fact I don't openly and always talk about this, I think it's important just to know dads talk about this stuff too, because it's way easy to make this way easy. And I've had actually somebody push back on my way and kind of say, yeah, but you're a dad, you don't get it. It's not the same. And I'd like to push back and say, no, I'm feeling it too. I get it. I get the sort of, I'm actively involved and enjoying helping my kids grow up, do something, become something, so I get it. I would never reduce it to say, like, somehow this is specifically a mom or a dad thing. I'm just going to put my hand up and say, yes, I'm thinking of this too. I have these worries. I have these moments.
I'm glad that you raised that the dad part of this, that we do consider these things. We do think about these things. We don't always talk about them. I find that, well, I'm lucky. The elementary school I work at does now have a significant number of male staff members.
Mm-hmm.
So it's good that I can talk to I can talk to the guys about certain things that I would talk to the ladies about. But all the years spent working with just females, there are certain things. How do I say this? Like, it's interesting to hear their perspective as an aggregate, like as a group, and then for me to consider my position on what their position is, like a mother-father difference, right?
Mm-hmm.
I would like to think that I'm as involved. I'm pretty involved with my kids, but I wonder what would happen if my kids didn't participate in extracurricular stuff. Like, I wonder, would I be as involved? I don't know. It's interesting, but I will tell you though, people know that, like I am popping out of school at the end of the day because I gotta get one of my kids somewhere. But the more important part of that is it's not just that I have to get my kid somewhere. It's that I want to be with my kid. So like, sometimes people will say to me, I'll say, "Oh, today's a busy one after school. I gotta zip home, grab the little one, then bring him home and maybe meet up with the big one or whatever." And they'll be like, they'll make a comment on the driving aspect, like, "Holy cow, like you need to get from here to here in this much time. And can't you get somebody else to drive them?" And then I'm like, "Oh, no, it's not about the driving. Like, I actually want to be there. Like, I think I'm more excited for my son's hockey this week after school than he is." Which, some people might have something to say about that. I can't wait to see him on the ice. Like, I enjoy seeing him participate. And I enjoy seeing the social aspect of that. I have made some friends at the rink. I like to see them and talk with them. I like to joke with their kids as they're hanging out with my kid. So there's a couple of layers to this, right? But I think at the top of it, like I want to be there with my kids. It's not just, oh, I have to drive so and so here, and then I got to drive so and so here. That's part of the stress. That's the part that comes out. But really, the part that should come out more often is, no, I want my kid has to be here, and I want to be with him. So when people say, "Why don't you just get him to get a ride?" I'm like, no, I want to be there. Like, I want to see it happen. I want to be part of it. It's not just me dropping somebody off somewhere.
Yeah, I agree. Totally agree with it.
When other teachers say it, I have no. It's funny, like some people. Here's the open door judgment thing again. I might see somebody take off right after school 3 days in a row. And there's a couple of things I could do there, right? Like, I could be like, "Holy cow, this person really doesn't want to be here." Like, the bell rang, their kids left, and they're like running down the street to leave. I try not to do that. I try to think, I wonder what's happening in their life. Like, maybe they have a doctor's appointment in 15 minutes. And it's the only time they could get, and their doctor's obviously pretty cool if they're open that late, because my school's a late ending school. And it sucks in a way, because if you have a doctor's appointment, they don't, like, we finish at 3:45. And I know my doctor, the last possible appointment they make is 3:20. So if I want to see my doctor, I have to miss school. And hey, let's not even get into the stress that causes with, like, I don't know about your board, but my board has an attendance program.
Yeah, we got that.
And it's like, that stresses me out, even though it shouldn't, because I have a health concern. That's why I'm going to the doctor. It still stresses me out. Or my kids have a doctor's appointment, and then I have to take an unpaid day or unpaid half day because it's not my appointment. Like, those things stress me out. I don't know what's happening to this person. I don't know if they have a doctor's appointment. I don't know if they have to be. I don't know, and what if they have a side business? And you know what? When that bell rings, they're free to go wherever they need to go. If they're not on duty, they don't have yard duty, their room is secure, their children are gone, why are they sticking around? Like, I know this is an age-old thing, this optics of how come that teacher leaves right after school?
It also goes back to our bag of work conversation. You remember that whole, like, there's elements here of just, you seeing someone carrying all their stuff in and out every day. What do you think? Them seeing you carrying nothing every day. What do they think? And then the sort of patterns of behavior where this is just consistent regardless of any thinking. Is it kind of like one of the teacher badges that you must, always have some sort of a coffee mug or water bottle in hand and have your recycled shopping bag full of marking and poster paper, you know what I mean? Oh, sorry, and the technology too. You got your laptop or your phone.
You know what's funny about that? That it brings a smile to my face because okay, so if I have to leave school right away, um, I will go out to my car during my preparation time or my lunch time, and I will put my bag of work and my lunch bag and all that away. So when it's time for me to go after school, I don't have 50 things in my hands. I can literally just go, get in the car and drive. That's how organized I try to be. And you know how many people see me leaving with nothing in my hands? Now, I don't really care that they have opinions on why I'm leaving with nothing in my hands. But my point is that the bag of work for some people is a badge of honor. Look at this big bag that I'm taking home. Some people have a suitcase. Look at this suitcase with wheels. You know, I've got things to do and I'm showing the world. That's great, man. Enjoy. I mean, what'd be funny if there's nothing in the suitcase and it was just being used for optics. Like, look at me. I'm wheeling this thing around because I've got so much to do tonight. And then there's people like me who are trying to be organized, who know that, oh, today I've got like a lot of stuff to take with me, but I don't want to be, you know, I don't want to be letting my kids out the door with my 3 backpacks on and my lunch bag. I don't want to do that. So I'm just going to get rid of it initially and just be able to go. Anyway, long story short, I have a late ending school. And so the heat is on. Like when the school day ends, there are some days that I have to leave immediately to be able to get to where I need to be on time. And that sucks because that doesn't happen for my wife. You know, her day ends and she can stick around for 20, 30 minutes before she has to leave. I don't have that option. I don't have that option. But here's the other thing too. Nobody seems to care that I get to school an hour before it starts, right? There's nobody there watching me come in with my stuff and saying, "Whoa, an hour earlier," right? Just like when I was on duty last year at the front of the school, I walk outside 15 minutes before school starts, and I'm seeing my colleagues pulling into the parking lot. I'm not wondering, "Well, what a slacker to get in here 15 minutes before the day starts." We're a late starting school. We start late, we end late. So, you know, I don't know what kind of life these people are living before they have to be at school legally at 9 a.m. I don't know. I know that you can get a lot done, though, before 9 a.m. if you set your mind to it. You could even have really cool, you can have appointments before 9 a.m. in the morning, like at an ultrasound place or something. You can go at 8 a.m., 8:15, and still make it to work on time. Like my wife can't do that because she's in early starting school. So she can't do that, but I could. So it's interesting, eh? It's like the two sides of the coin. I'm rushing out at 3:47 p.m. to get my kid to hockey and to hang out with him. But at 8:15 in the morning or 8:10 in the morning when I'm pulling in, there's nobody there to see that I'm there. I don't again, and I don't care, but my point is that are you open to hearing the story or are you closed to hearing the story? And even if I got there at 9 and left at 3:45, you don't know what my life is about. You don't know what kind of life I'm living. And as teachers, we're not supposed to interfere with each other's teaching life. Like I'm not supposed to be judging you on what time you get to work, what time you leave work, and how well you're doing your job. That's not my role. That's my principal's job, right? The only way I would get in somebody's face is if what they were doing was negatively impacting me somehow in some weird way. Then I'd be like, whoa, come on, can we talk about this or whatever? And I know there are people that see me. Whether you give me a thumbs up or you shake your head, it's not going to change what time I leave and why I'm leaving. And hey, I'll drop my armor here for a second, even more than usual. There are some days that are not good days for me. I'm just not feeling good. And I'm waiting for the end of the day to come so I can just go home and I can just be me in my home. I don't want to be at work. Now, I'm not saying I don't like my job. I'm not saying any of that. I'm saying there are days where I just want to go home for whatever reason. You know, it could involve like family issues. It could involve like anxiety at work or what's happening at work. But I get there and I do what I'm supposed to do during my time. And then the end of the day comes and I just want to go home. I don't want to be in that particular environment anymore. That happens too. And if it happens to me, it's got to happen to other people. So, you know, me saying it just, like I said, comes out and it goes back in. Whether you're giving me a thumbs up or you're shaking your head, it doesn't matter. I'm still leaving. And so if there are people out there who are like hiding in their portable for 10 or 15 minutes so that when they leave, people aren't shaking their head, I feel a little bit sad for you that you're doing that to yourself, but there's reasons why you're doing that to yourself too. And that's, I'm not judging. I'm just saying that's unfortunate that you can't leave when you feel like you need to leave, or that you can't arrive when you feel like you need to arrive, whatever. It's not, you know, maybe one day if I'm a principal and I see this occurring, I might say to someone, I might reiterate the message as the leader of the building, the leader of the staff. Hey, if there's anything I could do to support you and help you when you're here to do like an amazing job, let me know. And hopefully they would trust me enough to seek out support if they need it. And I think that's the message, right? And I get that message loud and clear from my admin team. I feel as though they're very supportive of me and they understand that I have stuff with my kids after school because they've been there. And that's why I'm not staying till 5 p.m. You know, even if I wanted to, I have a wife who teaches. Somebody has to come home and start dinner depending on what's happening on a particular day. Like we were talking the other day about the first week of school, meet the teacher night, the kids' extracurriculars and other obligations we have. Next week looks like a gong show on our calendar, an absolute gong show where we have had a couple of conflicting times scheduled right into our calendar. And then we had to look at the calendar and prioritize what's getting dumped and what's not. So on one night, we have three obligations, but we can't be at all three. So one of them has to go. And one of them has to stay. Like meet the teacher night for my wife, it's not coming off the calendar. She will be there come hell or high water. So and you know, she was a little bit like, what are we going to do? And I just started laughing. I'm like, well, let's look at these 3 items. Which one's not going to get canceled? And she's like, I'm going to my meet the teacher. I said, right on. I said, and I'm doing this with William. So that's right. The third one gone. Call that person, tell them we won't be there at that time. Can't make it work. And it's, you know, no fault of our own. Meet the teacher night has been scheduled for Sarah's school. They're not changing it because Sarah has to be somewhere else. Then the next night, we have another conflict. Guess what? It's my meet the teacher. So that's not getting canceled. I'm going. And again, we look at the order, we rank them, something gets dumped. And my wife and I are not busy people. There's no badge of honor for us to have all these conflicts on our schedule. Ideally, the schedule would be wide open and like one kid has a sporting event and then one of us can come home and start dinner and like get things kind of relatively calm at home while the other person is somewhere with one of the kids. That's ideal. Well, ideal is nothing. We just both come. I get to stay 15 or 20 minutes after school to do whatever. She does the same. We both come home and we live our family life. So thanks for letting me talk a little bit about that, because at the end of all that, my realization is that I'm not changing the way I operate based on how people are perceiving it and based on what they think or feel about it. They can think and feel how they want. It's not going to change my behavior. And my behavior is not wrong. That's the other thing too. My behavior, there's nothing wrong. Work is finished. and now I'm leaving work. Sometimes in the teaching profession, that is weird to people because they just assume that you have stuff to do at work after school. And some days you do, but some days you can make it so that you don't because you have to go. Do you feel the same thing in high school, or is high school different? Because I know, you know, my circumstances, elementary school teacher, and I have a late start time and a late end time.
Yeah, it's no, it's similar. There's the all the sound of the stereotypes and the sort of like the observation, the whole bag of work stuff. Yeah, that's active at secondary. I don't know what the thing is that makes it different. Um, our school, because of the size of it, like we start at just after 8 in the morning and we end just after 2:30. And one of the truths is because of its location, the intersection it's at, like there's no great way there's no great way to get out the door if you're teaching the last period of the day. Like you're just kind of locked in. The driveway's too busy, the roads are too busy. So it's almost like you might as well sit for a bit, 20, 25 minutes and just let the parking lots clear and then kind of head out. Um, I think also because of the size of the building, kind of people observing the coming and going of other individuals is a little bit more like it's more sporadic. Like it's harder to see when people are coming in. Our department offices are spread out all over the school, so even your interaction with people as you move from, let's say, your teaching space, your classroom, to your office to pick up your stuff, if that's what you got to do, like you wouldn't necessarily encounter a ton of people. Plus, our school is multi-floor, so there's different exits that you can go out. Like for every spot where your car could be parked, there's two exits that you could go out. So on each side of the building on main floor, there's two exits to actually walk out to those parking lots. So, you start to run the numbers, and the likelihood, if you were to run into somebody and have a conversation that's like, hey, what are you doing after school? Like, where are you off to? Whoa, you're out of here fast. Like, the numbers, the likelihood is, I think, just in my case, a little bit lower, and it's just size and scale that plays into that. But those conversations still happen. Like you sort of are wondering when people are hustling out, what they're hustling out to. It's a little bit of that moment. It's like there's no smooth transition out of the workday. Sometimes people can do it into the workday a little bit, like that's sort of like, because period one of the day is like a fresh period. As you come into that, you're sort of like on ramping. Not only like your period one is a sudden start, but period one is a start to the school day. So you even look at how you feel and where your energy is at as you roll into period two, and you kind of feel like you've kind of gotten into your day. You're into the sort of like the motions and the energy of your day. So I think what happens is that you sort of start to get this kind of comfort zone that comes through lunch and then through period three, and then period four, it's just like the day just ends, and there's no good way to kind of like end, whether you're teaching or the activity or you're learning, like your classroom experience just ends, and it's an absolute. So there's a bit of I think there's always a bit of at the end of the school day, a bit of astonishment that you sort of hit the end of the day. And different people, that feels different ways. Some people, I'm sure, feel very relaxed because they've managed to kind of frame their lesson to include a bit of tapering at the end of the lesson, so that when the bell goes at 2:35, 2:30, everyone's just like, oh yes, have a pleasant afternoon. Yes, you're sort of, everything's all packed up nicely and neatly. But that hasn't been my experience. It's stark and sudden, and the end of the day happens, and then all of a sudden it's like school day persona experience clip, Clough, dad, move into the next sort of like, what do I now have to get done that has nothing to do with school? And as you mentioned, pick up the kids, get dinner ready. I might have to stop and do some shopping on the way home. Dang, I should have got gas on the way in. I got to get gas now, So there's all those other little things that creep in. And people watching me go about that, I have to be honest, I am more of the, if people were to observe my behaviors during the day, I am more of the someone observing and saying, holy crap, what's he going to do with all that stuff that he's bringing into the classroom? As opposed to, holy crap, look at all the stuff he's taking home at the end of the day. What's he going to do with that at home? So I tend to leave with empty hands. But it's because of the way that my courses are designed that it's kind of getting used and consumed in the classroom experience. So I'm inputting a lot, and every once in a while, more times than not, the stuff that I need to do at home is digital. So it's hidden on my laptop. And even that, I leave my work laptop at work. I have a desktop that I can do that on. So I am looking to increase my agility and mobility at the end of the day and not really carry a lot of stuff home. So, and whatever judgment may ensue from that, I'm open to the discussion if anyone ever wanted to ask me.
Sounds good.
Yeah, man.
So I think we put down a pretty good episode, and I think we were able to keep some barriers. Like the fact that we didn't talk about some of the stuff that came up in our on-ramp is a bit of a miracle, because it could have gotten a lot heavier than what it was. Or so what it is, because we're currently still talking.
Yeah, it's true. One of the cool things, if you ever, we could do Easter eggs. So if you are curious about what our on-ramp could have been about, check our Twitter feeds from this morning. Because you'll see, right? You'll see some of it. What we actually talked about it is different, but some of the discussion stuff, you could check our Twitter feeds from this morning, and you'll see part of what we discussed about this morning, what made it into our on-ramp.
Yeah, and today is September 1st, 2019. Can you believe we've entered into September? It's crazy.
I'm okay with that. It's sort of, I was reading a lot of Twitter feeds this week about how do you transition into the September start. I just shake my head. I said, there's nothing good you could do. There's nothing good. There's nothing good. As I'm saying to my own children, yes, we're going to try to get you to bed earlier. And I'm thinking, I don't believe any of it really works. I don't honestly, I'm okay, fine. I'm being lazy. We don't really have a process. We know flat out that we're going to be struggling with our kids tomorrow, telling them that you need to go back to bed at that time that you used to go to bed at when school was on, and you got to get up the next day at that time that you used to get up at when school was on, and we're just going to deal. Try and get the kids as well slept as possible. Maybe I'll get slept as well as possible. I don't know.
It's going to be interesting for sure. I hear what you're saying, and I know my wife is a lot more. My wife has certain expectations about what happens tomorrow night.
Mm-hmm.
Because today's Sunday, so Monday, Labor Day, and the funny thing is that she won't be able to sleep. So even though she will, even though she'll be all prepped and ready for Tuesday, I don't think she'll be able to sleep as well as she will, in the middle of November. And for myself, I know I'm in trouble in terms of my sleeping habits, but hey, you know what? They'll shift. Just like when school ended, it shifted. School starting, they'll shift. It'll go back to its regular. It'll go back to a way that will hopefully work for my work. I'm looking forward to meeting my students. I'm looking forward to starting things up and having some fun, but I'm not looking forward to the hecticness that comes with it. But I don't think anybody likes that about their work. Like nobody likes that stressful feeling of having to leave at a certain time and do certain things, and all of a sudden there's not enough time to do everything you need to do. But there never is, I guess, So it's all good.
We convince ourselves because we sort of make it. It's that's a reflection after the fact that somehow we were efficient and we were able to meet the kind of goals. I mean, I look at my planner here and the way that I sort of lay out the critical things I have to get done and the stuff that just kind of gets squeezed off the table. It's an impossible bit of time management, I find, and there's stuff that, if it kind of gets beyond a couple of days, I just kind of exit out and I go I have to let that one go. Gotta let it go. Note to self. I don't know. Get it done next time, because I wouldn't even say to myself, plan better, because I think I planned pretty well. and do I actually want to be that much of a kind of automaton where everything is sort of laid out exactly how the day should play out? It's sort of, hard to find the living in between there.
Dude, can we see your sketch note for today?
Yeah, for sure. Let me just where's my I had a pencil here. Here,
For all
erase one.
For all the people that are listening and not watching, Chris is about to show us what he drew, colored, whatever on his pad of paper.
Yeah, I don't even. I got to be honest. I don't even know what.
Interesting optics. That's cool, dude. Do you wanna like how what brought you to that? The prisms and the colors. You don't know, eh?
I started with the concept of reflective practice. That's where I kind of started, and then kind of got into. You were talking about, I guess, perception. You're on the outside talking about, how we view things. You kind of mentioned your boy's perspective of being in that big open space. There was something about the messiness. There was something about how ideas kind of get realigned, and then somewhere near the end, it's like, yeah, it don't matter none. It just kind of gets really messy. But all kind of stemming from our episode 1 so yeah, there was the little things that were kind of
cool. Okay, well, I think that's it for this episode. My hands are right here. As usual, our new tradition is you turn this thing off. I don't touch it anymore. And hopefully next Saturday or Sunday we can carve out some more time to talk and keep this thing going.
Yeah, we'll have I'm looking forward to the real-time data of having the kidlets in the classroom to see what that kind of sparks up. It's another data point to start driving our conversations. So
for sure.
And I'll connect with you sometime this week, man.
Right on. Me too. Take care.
Safe hands.